Hey there, Trailblazers. I hope you guys are all doing well. So, I know it's kind of really early, but we're already getting some pretty juicy info related to future HSR updates. And I'm guessing you clicked on this video because you're interested in that, right? Well, you have conveniently landed on the absolute perfect video to get all of this info. Today, I am mainly going to talk about new gameplay info that we have received about upcoming characters such as Robin and Aventurin's new 5-star forms, as well as Stoneheart member Pearl and Nihilix. And along with this, we'll also talk about new Nova Flare buffs for older characters, a new Mono Remembrance healer, and even a potential brand new playable path coming in version 5. But before we begin, just keep in mind that all of the info presented here is from unofficial sources, which could change at any point in time, so please make sure to take everything with a huge grain of salt. With that out of the way, let's get right into it without wasting any more of your time. So first of all, let's talk about Robin SP. According to the latest information, Robin SP is currently expected to be a wind element character that follows the path of remembrance. Now, we had already heard before that Robin's new form was likely going to play a very unique role, but this latest information gives us a much better idea of what that role might actually be. Apparently, her entire kit revolves around granting a memo sprite to a designated ally. And from the sounds of it, Robin herself doesn't seem to focus much on personal damage. Instead, the character receiving that memo sprite appears to be the real star of the show. The leak mentions that whenever the designated character takes enough actions, they'll automatically gain action advances, which immediately makes Robin SP sound like a support character focused on accelerating another unit's turns and helping them perform more actions throughout a fight. What's particularly interesting is that the information suggests her lower investment versions are mostly focused on buffs and turn manipulation. However, with higher investment levels, she may also gain access to respectable damage herself. So depending on how Hoyoverse designs her final numbers, Robin SP could end up being one of those characters that starts off as a premium support but gains additional offensive value through Eidolons. Another interesting detail is that the source specifically mentions that Robin SP seems heavily connected to Himiko SP teams, which lines up with previous information we've seen suggesting that Robin SP may eventually replace Sunday in some of Himiko's strongest team compositions. So if you're somebody planning to pull for Himiko SP, Robin SP might end up becoming a character worth keeping a very close eye on. Now moving on from Robin SP, let's talk about Aventurin SP. And honestly, this is where things start getting really interesting. According to the newest information, Aventurin SP is currently expected to be a quantum element character that follows the elation path. And unlike the original Aventurin, who focused heavily on defense and sustain, this version appears to be much more offensively oriented. The leak describes him as a dual-mode character, meaning that he can apparently be played in two completely different ways depending on the team you're running. One option is placing him inside dedicated elation teams. The other is using him in follow-up attack teams, provided that there is only one elation character present. Apparently, his damage profile revolves around dishing out a large number of smaller hits that eventually convert into a much larger burst of damage through his elation mechanics. And honestly, that sounds very fitting for Aventurin. Instead of one giant attack, it sounds like he'll constantly pressure enemies through repeated attacks until everything eventually explodes into massive damage. The leak also mentions that his E0 version seems more focused on supporting elation teams, while his higher Eidolons significantly improve his follow-up attack capabilities, which would explain why some leakers have previously compared the strength of Aventurin SP's vertical investment to Mordenax's blades. So overall, Aventurin SP is sounding like one of the more flexible DPS characters currently in development. Now speaking of future characters, let's move on to Pearl. As many of you already know, Pearl is one of the remaining Stoneheart members that players have been waiting to become playable. And according to this new information, Pearl is currently expected to follow the elation path as well. The leak describes some of her earlier concepts as a single-target tank with a unique brain-in-a-vat mechanic. Although the source also mentions that this idea may no longer be part of her current design. Instead, it sounds like Pearl may now function as a speed buffer while still maintaining respectable damage output herself. Which honestly sounds pretty promising, because speed manipulation continues to be one of the strongest mechanics in Honkai Star Rail. So if Pearl ends up combining speed buffs with meaningful damage contribution, she could become a very valuable addition to future team compositions. Now, let's talk about Nihilix. Because this character continues to look more and more important every time new information appears. According to the latest details, Nihilix is currently expected to be a quantum element character following the elation path. And unlike Aventurin SP, who appears to function more as a multi-hit damage dealer, Nihilix is described as a skill point-focused main DPS. The leak specifically mentions speed scaling, elation-based damage mechanics, and a talent known as True or False Aha, which honestly sounds exactly like the type of chaotic mechanic you would expect from an elation character. What's particularly interesting is that Nihilix apparently has the flexibility to function as both a support and a main DPS depending on investment level. The source even claims that at E1 she becomes a dedicated main carry, while at E2 she may potentially replace Sparksy in certain Silver Wolf teams. And if that information ends up being accurate, then Nihilix could easily become one of the most important elation characters ever released. Because flexibility is always valuable. Characters that can perform multiple roles tend to age extremely well over time. Now, another interesting piece of information is related to a completely new healer. Apparently, Hoyoverse is currently working on a mono remembrance healer. And according to the leak, the character may either be Rika or Mikhail, although Rika seems to be the more likely candidate right now. What's particularly interesting is that their core mechanic supposedly revolves around copying follow-up attack effects. And honestly, that sounds incredibly powerful. Because depending on how that mechanic works, it could potentially create some very unique interactions with future Remembrance and follow-up attack teams. So this is definitely one of those characters that I think people should keep an eye on moving forward. Now, aside from character kits, we also received some information regarding future skins. According to the source, both Robin SP and Aventurin SP are expected to receive skins. The theme for these skins is reportedly centered around formal suits. And apparently Aventurin's design is said to resemble the outfit he wore during the Stoneheart Myriad Celestia trailer. Which, if true, is probably going to make a lot of Aventurin fans very happy. Because that outfit has been one of the most requested alternate looks for him ever since it first appeared. Now, moving on from skins, let's talk about some future Nova Flare buffs. The source claims that additional buffs are currently planned for both Jing Yuan and Acheron. And apparently these improvements are expected to arrive around version 4.7. Which honestly makes a lot of sense. Because both characters remain incredibly popular, and future balance adjustments could help them synergize better with some of the newer characters currently being developed. The leak also mentions that Sunday and Jiacho buffs are still reportedly happening as well. So it sounds like Hoyoverse has no intention of slowing down when it comes to upgrading older units. And honestly, that's great news. Because one of the best things they've done recently has been making older characters relevant again through Nova Flare upgrades. Finally, let's talk about the really big piece of information from this leak. According to the source, version 5.x is expected to heavily focus on finality and permanence. Apparently, one of these concepts will receive an entirely new in-story faction, while the other may actually become a fully playable path in the game. Now, obviously, this is extremely early information, but if it ends up being true, it could represent one of the biggest gameplay expansions Honkai Star Rail has ever received. because introducing a brand new playable path would completely change how future characters are designed. And it would also open the door for entirely new team archetypes and mechanics moving forward. So this is definitely something worth watching closely as we get closer to the launch of version 5. So that's pretty much all of the new info that I have for this video. If you found the info in this video helpful, feel free to give it a like. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all the latest Honkai Star Rail news and leaks. That's it for now, so I'll see you in the next video.